April 8th, 1943. Portsmouth, England. The wind comes hard off the Solent and walks the length of the harbor, rattling signal halyards and whirring the loose tin on roof lines along Queen Street. A steam whistle at the dockyard lets go a long, tired breath. Cranes stand like black exclamation marks against low weather. In the half-light before the shift, a young woman in a dark blue greatcoat, leading Wren Margaret Ellis, waits with her collar up at the tram stop beyond the harbor station, listening to the iron groan of the yard coming awake. Somewhere a dog barks, and from across the water a tug chuffs, its exhaust coughing in the damp. She feels the paper in her pocket. Posted orders, a new assignment. UGQ, Fort Southwick. Communications. Report immediately. She has heard the initials whispered like a spell. Underground headquarters. A nerve center dug into the chalk ridge above the city. She does not know yet that she will spend the next year beneath the earth, bent over switchboards and message pads, while ships form up like storm clouds in Spithead, and that on one long night the voice that cracks in her ear will be Admiral Ramsay's himself, asking if the convoy is holding station in the tide. Above her, the tram's headlight combs the street, and she climbs aboard with the yardmen, the smell of salt and oil following everyone inside. The city is ordinary. The city is changing. And no one standing on the platform knows that what they call a depot, a victualling yard, an armaments pier, an oil jetty, will become something else, something a continent will feel. At Thorney Island, west of Chichester Harbor, a shoal of salt and sky where the coastal wind never truly rests, a different day opens on a different hour. The spring of 1944 has brought low cloud and a hard dew to the grass that was once meadow and is now runway. The prop blast of a Hawker Typhoon throws up a sleeve of damp, and ground crews in leather jerkins tug wheel chocks clear. 164 Squadron, then men of 183, 198, 609, their codes painted clean against the matte finish, have moved in and settled by flight lines. The chalk channels of the harbor beyond them, and, farther still, the long French shore. They smoke and stamp their boots, and listen for the throttle change from idle to takeoff. The Napier saber coughing, then catching, then roaring to a load that sets teeth on edge. This field, they've been told, is not just another forward station. It is a springboard where operations now carry different names and different weight. The orders pinned in the ready room bear targets that are not just roads and rolling stock, but radar and listening posts, eyes and ears on the far side of the channel that must be blinded, dimmed, cut, silenced before something larger can move under cover of doubt. That morning, a Typhoon rides its own slipstream and claws into the gray. The island shrinks behind it. Beneath the wings, the Solent glints like a blade. The pilot, his name stitched in ink on a label that has seen weather and worry, keeps his mouth shut on the oxygen tube and waits for the dart of coastline ahead, knowing that the work of one airfield can be the silence of many guns. In February and March, 2nd TAF units are ordered to drive at German radar stations and coastal batteries to unpick threads in a net that has held the channel for years. Here at Thorney, the squadrons that fly these sorties wear the weight of that task without saying much at all. It feels like someone pushing furniture around in a dark room before a guest arrives. That's how it starts, quietly. That's how it becomes a promise. If you step ashore in Portsmouth in the summer of 1943, you don't see an invasion. You see notices. You see uniforms. You see that in August, the South Sea seafront becomes forbidden ground. The promenade that used to collect prams and parasols now belongs to sentries and barbed wire, and the old bandstand watches an empty beach. By April 1st, 1944, the clamp tightens. A 10-mile strip along the southern coast closes to visitors from the Wash to Land's End. And the South is no longer just a place on a map. It is a marshalling chamber with regulations and silence sewn into its edges. Coaches appear at odd hours, their windows curtained, their brakes sighing at crossroads you never knew mattered. Roads receive letters, Area C around Portsmouth, and soldiers learn their chalk numbers and assembly points. The little white signs that say, "To the sea," remain, but no one follows them. The air becomes dense with unasked questions. It is a strange way to watch a country make itself ready, by limiting movement, by telling people they may not see what they have always seen. And yet, in that absence, you can hear it. The great, scraping hush of a nation gathering itself. The old names on the Gosport shore, Priddy's Hard, Royal Clarence, Haslar, shift inside their skins. The Royal Naval Armaments Depot at Priddy's Hard, once a fort and then a magazine, becomes the London of shells and fuses. Its brick casemates and long traverses stack the weight that sea captains will ask of their gunners. Down the harbor at Royal Clarence Victualling Yard, mills grind, ovens burn, and sides of beef vanish into the machinery of feeding fleets. The place smells of yeast and brine and steam, everything it takes to make sailors into a moving city that can stay at sea. You could stand on the Hardway shore, nose into a wind that smells like cordite and bread, and not quite see the pattern. That munitions and meat are the two ends of the same rope, the thing that lets a ship pull on a problem until it gives. The work at these places is so practical, it appears invisible. Tally books, hooks, hoists, bales, crates, chutes, the slip of a pencil on a damp page. But taken together, it's a heartbeat you can feel through the quay. On some nights, you can see the yawning mouths of lighters tied up, low, black, boxy creatures that will carry what Priddy's Hard has packed. In daylight, women in overalls come off shift and walk home along Weevil Lane, their hands smelling of oil and paper and flour. The gates count them as numbers, but the city learns their faces by the set of their shoulders. That's logistics, and it looks like nothing but doing your job. It is, in fact, the job of making victory possible, the job of... Fuel is a different kind of hunger. You don't see it until a ship swings at anchor, alive again. North of the Dockyard, under Portsdown Hill, the Navy has hidden a cathedral of oil. 9 concrete tanks linked by miles of tunnel. A bomb-proof reservoir that drinks the night in and learns how to keep it. Pumps hum in the dark. Gauges quiver. A web of buried pipe runs down toward the harbor, finishing on the Gosport side at the oil-fuel jetty where the hoses have the quiet certainty of a surgeon's hands. Sailors walking by would see only fences and warning signs. What they didn't see was better. The flow measured in tons, the way a fleet can be kept ready when the ocean itself is a kind of enemy. More than 100,000 tons of furnace fuel oil behind that hill. A system that speaks in pressure and valves and checklists. Everyone knows a ship without shells is a worry. Far fewer know a ship without oil is a statue. The miracle of a depot is that it turns statues back into motion without anyone clapping. Just a depot. That's what someone from away might say, passing Gosport by bus, catching a drift of tar and rope through the open pane. But follow a lorry down to Stokes Bay and stand where the shingle meets the cast concrete of a new Hard, and you see that even the beach has been drafted. The Hards, G1 to G5, are poured right into the coast, concrete teeth biting the sea so that steel mouths, LCTs, LSTs, LCIs, can come and feed on tanks and lorries and men. Hardmasters keep their clipboards under oilskins. Military policemen in white webbing count chalk numbers off tailgates. A sergeant shouts that the tarpaulins must be tight and the bicycle must go on last. The line of vehicles reaches back past the park, past the battery, past the houses whose blackout curtains meet carefully in the middle. On afternoons in May, you can stand on high ground and watch Exercise Fabius moving like a weather front. British divisions loading at Portsmouth and Gosport for Littlehampton and Hayling, Canadians at Bracklesham, Americans at Slapton. The sea rehearsing how it will swallow and return what's asked of it. The surf lifts its lip over the concrete. An officer holds 2 fingers to his whistle. The ramp clatters. Everything is ordinary, and then nothing is. In the afternoon, Fort Southwick feels like a place that has done its fighting already. Victorian brick and earthwork, caponiers for a war of angles and musketry. The surprise waits under it. A spiral stair drops into chalk and cool air, and the world changes from weather to wire. The underground headquarters, call sign Min, runs like a bone inside the hill. Tunnels arched in corrugate, rooms hung with maps and plotting boards, switchboards that chime like a nervous clock. Wrens and headphones work the lines, WRNS teleprinters chatter, and ratings cross the tunnel with messages whose weight is only visible when someone's eyes widen as they read. The thing they are building here is not a torpedo or a ship or a gun. It is a picture. Reports from radar stations, ship signals, ciphers, the long breath of Admiralty wireless. Every piece laid against another until a living chart of the channel forms and moves and can be believed. On a bad day, the humidity makes the paper curl at the corners. On a good day, the pencils knock a clean rhythm like a metronome. Above, the ridge watches the sea. Below, a city of voices learns to speak as one. A few miles away at Southwick House, the white front and regular windows like a gentleman's calm, another picture grows. A wall has been given to the channel, from Torbay to Cherbourg, with the lanes marked like careful scars. Men in uniforms of different cuts gather in a room that smells faintly of polish and paper. Ramsey, Montgomery, Lee Mallory, Tedder, and Eisenhower, who listens with his chin down and his hands clasped, as Group Captain James Stagg, a Scot with a quiet voice, explains a thing everyone can feel in their bones. That weather is a weapon you cannot order, but must learn to read. It is June 4th. The wind outside walks through the trees like a man in a hurry. Rain deals its cards on the windows. Stagg says there will be a gale of a particular sort and a break of a particular size, and that if they move a day, they will find not a clear sky, but a tolerable one, a sky good enough to put men through. The map watches them all, indifferent as a god. Eisenhower nods. If ships go, they go now. If men die, they die so that others can live. The decision is both enormous and invisible. The ink dries at the same speed as always. Back at Thorney Island, a Typhoon sits with its engine idling low. A Priddy mechanic's spanner still warm from the prop spinner. Ground crew have chalked checks on the cowling. The armorer has run his hands down rockets like a priest along the edge of a Bible. In May, these squadrons have flown anti-surface sweeps and cut the nervous system of the enemy where he listens to the sea. They have learned the smell of unpainted pine where new huts go up, the taste of toothpaste before dawn patrol, the ache of knowing that when the landings begin, they will be asked to go low and fast among columns and hedgerows and gun positions, to do a deadly arithmetic with seconds and speed. And yet the work that mattered most in the spring was against the unseen, the lattice of German radar along the coast. Hits against Freya and Würzburg, someone wrote in a report. Nothing burns in those words, and everything does. Portsmouth learns new habits. Each night in May and early June, tugs slide out to shepherd things waiting in the dark. Lines of landing craft like terraced houses, LSTs with their huge blunt bows and ladders that look too thin for what they will carry. In Hardway, the queue of vehicles up Priory Road becomes a kind of weather. Residents measure their evenings by how far the tail lights reach. At Priddy's Hard, the night shift keeps the rhythm. At Weevil, the ovens glow. The city's windows turn black on command. In pubs by the Camber, voices drop when the door opens. The thing here is not bravado. It is preparation. Thousands of pieces of a clock moving to midnight, none of them sure what time it is. All of them certain it will strike. German intelligence is not blind. It simply sees what it has been taught to see. For months, the Allies have fed it a diet of lies resolutely close to the truth. Camps in the wrong places, real units behind fake names, wireless traffic that never had to pretend. Fortitude South, they call the bigger story. A phantom army under Patton poised at the mouth of the channel for a blow at Pas de Calais. A tale that strokes the enemy's own convictions until they purr. On the coast of Normandy, the Germans lay their men in steel like fingers on a map, ready to close on a threat they have been promised. Meanwhile, southern England closes itself and grows thicker, denser, more secretive by the hour. And when German reconnaissance aircraft risk the channel, Allied air superiority makes those flights rare and hurried. The photographs blurred, the photo interpreters cautious. In the calculus of war, doubt is as deadly as a shell. Portsmouth and its quiet violence, the loading, the fueling, the arming, the boarding, unfolds behind deception's veil. And in the crisis, Germany learns a simple story too late. That the truth is happening where you do not wish to look. On the evening of June 5th, rain walks the esplanade in broken lines, and sailors turn up their collars and quicken their step. At Stokes Bay, the sea is a dull pewter dish, and above it barrage balloons drift like patient, leashed creatures. Military police wave the last of the columns forward. Drivers roll cigarettes with damp hands and light them 3 times before they catch. Tank engines cough, then settle. A Wren messenger, Margaret, arrives at the hardmaster's office with a folded signal and a voice still ringing from the tunnel's telephones. The officers inside nod without smiling. The signal is, in its bones, simple. H hour is fixed. The concrete is slick under boots, and the ramp of an LCT slams down, metal on metal, a sound that raises hairs even on men who have learned to watch one another for fear of showing too much. The vehicles crawl aboard, chalk numbers ticking in a column that has no poetry, only exactness. A small domestic Mercy slips through the wind. Someone's packed a tin of plum jam, someone else a photograph wrapped in wax paper. At dusk, the craft that can hold station do so. Those that must hold the beach, hold. Night comes early when the clouds are low. Above them, not far off the French coast, where the night is at its darkest and the rain not quite rain, RAF crews pull open sacks of window and feed them into the slipstream. Strips of aluminium spin and glitter in the rain, like a kind of unseasonable snow that shows up. To a German radar. Not as nonsense, but as a fleet. Down below, harbor defense motor launches tow reflector balloons and chatter on radios in a carefully staged way. A ghost armada approaches Pas de Calais. Another ghosts the coast near Antifer. Both keep faith with the lie that has been told for months. Somewhere ashore, a German officer steps out into a courtyard to listen, and hears nothing but the weather. Inside, an operator mutters that the screen is full. Batteries open up its shadows on the water. Later, no one will agree on how much these illusions mattered. In the moment, the important thing is that they existed, and that men inside small wet boats did what they were told. The main body slides south, heavy with real war, while the false body drifts where the enemy expects it. Deception opens a quiet lane where true ships run. Midnight. Down in the tunnels at Fort Southwick, the lights draw circles on damp cement. The plotting boards are alive with grease pencil tracks. The tunnel breathes as dozens of people do. Reports come in staccato. Minesweepers sweeping, the sea being combed of its old teeth. Convoys across their release lines. An escort reporting a U-boat hunt farther west. Airborne formations assembling north of the Cotentin. The Wrens are the sound inside the sound. Yes, sir. Line clear. Message received. The call sign Amin rides the net, cool as a surgeon. On the wall at Southwick House, the wooden map carries pins that step forward like the steady beat of a boot on a plank. And in the city above, people asleep dream of trains and beaches. The sea keeps its own counsel. At Thorney, the pilots brief by torchlight that leaks through a blackout cloth, the smell of wet grass and hot oil in nose and throat. Targets, timings, routes, the caution that will save a life and the audacity that will win a battle. Someone jokes about breakfast. No one laughs. At first light, Typhoons go. The sound is a physical thing, a rod to the back, a strike to the chest. They crossed the coast in low cloud on QDM headings practiced until the movements were muscle and habit. And on the French side, they find what war always offers when you ask it a direct question. Fire. A pilot later will say nothing memorable about it, only that he saw columns, and the columns stopped moving. He will not mention the smell of burning fuel in a green field, or the way the hedges throw back smoke in ragged flags, or how surreal it is to see a church steeple lancing a sky where tracers try to write their own red scripture. What Thorney offered to that morning was speed and weight. What it took back was countable only by ground crews who, hours later, ran hands along torn skin and patched with silver where the sky had bitten. It is the strange arithmetic of air, to be everywhere in a place you cannot touch. In the lanes and flats of the Solent, the convoys form a geometry we only ever see when nations are in extremis. Lines hold steady against tidal sets. Escorts pace like sheepdogs who know their flock must not bunch or scatter. On one ship, a lieutenant of the Royal Navy tightens his fingers on a chart's edge as the pencil ticks off minutes to the lowering. On another, an RASC officer checks manifests that list only what will be necessary today. Vehicles, weapons, water, rations. The operating theater crated and lashed. The generator in its blackout box. Back at Royal Clarence, the last crates and bread sacks are struck down into the bellies of supply ships. Priddy's hard is emptying by the hour. Men with the grit of explosive dust at their cuffs sit for a moment on a bollard and drink something too hot from enamel mugs before the next lighter comes alongside, and they are swallowed again by the shape of war. The oil pumps under Portsdown spin until the vibration feels like a companion in the bones. Everything that is stored wants to be spent. Every gallon and shell is accountable only if it crosses that line where sky meets sea and makes itself known in a deep, simple language. Movement, recoil, wake. Just before dawn, the weather does as Stagg promised. Not kind, only possible. The cloud is high enough to observe. The wind not so fierce as to break the assault craft. The tide on its arc. The black shapes at anchor give up their stillness in a great, subtle letting go. A choreography that looks casual until you try to count what it requires. Somewhere in the Min tunnels, a line on a board is wiped and redrawn. Somewhere else in Southwick House, a pin advances. Eisenhower has already slept as much as he will. Ramsay leans toward a phone as only a man who knows ships and their stubbornness since boyhood can lean, intent, patient, exact. Lee Mallory watches the airborne picture flicker into place. Sticks scattered, yes, but outposts taken, bridges cut, panic seeded. Montgomery in his caravan stares at the map as if it owes him money. No one is in charge of the sea but the sea. Everyone behaves as if they might be. On the shingle at Stokes Bay, the indifference of beaches to history is total. A gull lifts, hangs, and slides north. The wind brings a smell of wet rope and diesel. A boy, forbidden from the promenade, presses his face to the upstairs glass of a house in Alverstoke, and sees only dark water and the hint of distant shapes that might be fishing boats or might be something else entirely. His mother closes the curtains. On the hard, a corporal checks that the lashings on a Wren carrier are sitting where they should. A driver named Tom bleeds a little from a nick he does not remember getting. The handkerchief he uses to dab it comes away black. The ramp rises. The boat backs into the chop, homesick for the beach before it has left it. Out in Spithead, ships have names that echo and names that don't. Battleships with reputations, corvettes with virtues, landing craft whose identities are nothing but numbers. They turn their prows at France. This is the moment when a depot stops being a collection of stores and becomes a verdict. German reconnaissance will not catch the full measure of it. Allied fighters knock at every door along the coast with an engine note that says, "Do not come up here today." The few photographs that make it back are oracular, when what the staff officers crave are plain, comprehensible facts. In KTBs and reports, German officers write of concentrations, of shipping in the Channel. They do not write of what Portsmouth has become because no photograph can show a working city's intent. Fortitude's phantom burns in their minds. Pas-de-Calais holds them in a grip stronger than any arm. It will take them hours, then days, to admit that a place they did not mark as decisive has made itself into the hinge by which the door opens. The hinge is not showy. It creaks softly. It never boasts. It bears weight until weight is gone. By mid-morning on June 6th, the first rumors come back to the tunnels at Southwick. Coded, thin, enough to suggest shape and not enough to satisfy hunger. Sword, Juno, gold. Mulberries nowhere yet. But certain necessities begin to look less like miracles and more like scheduled tasks. Ballast, beachmasters, bulldozers doing the rude, holy work of ordering chaos. The Wrens keep their rhythm. Chalk dust rides men's trouser legs ashore and writes pale marks on new French roads. In Portsmouth, the dock gates swing and swing again. The ferries are not ferries. The trams dutifully carry their ordinary cargoes when they run at all. The baker fires his oven and leans on the door with his palms, feeling for the heat as if reading a braille of flame. That afternoon, if you stood on Portsdown and looked south, you would see the fleet sprawled in the Solent like a dream someone forgot to wake up from. It is not a fleet. It is a promise being kept in slow motion. The days after are a different kind of labor. More men, more vehicles, more crates moving out. The yards measure accomplishment in emptinesses. Bays cleared of shells, stacks of biscuit tins opened and gone, pumps idling because a tank has been drained and switched to another. The work runs like a fever that does not break because it must not. At Thorney, the squadrons that woke Normandy with rockets and cannon keep their vigil. Interdiction, close support, the mathematics of force brought low to road and hedgerow and sunken lane. If, on a bright day, you catch the glitter of invasion stripes across the harbor sky, you look up and think not of paint, but of purpose. That these bands tell friend from foe in a sky where both are too busy to ask questions. If you are German in those days, you do not see Portsmouth itself. You see its consequence. If you are British, you begin to see what you were part of without being able to say when it began. That is the mark of a real transformation. It happens while you are working, and at the end, you put down your tools and discover you have made not what you expected, but what was necessary. One evening, a week on, Margaret takes her tea outside the entrance to the tunnel and feels the light on her face like something returned. She thinks of the nights and the map and the consensus that had to be arrived at under pressure. Inches of pencil lead vanished into a story so that ships could find one another in a moving world. She thinks of the first time she said "min" into a handset, and an admiral answered as if she had always been there. She thinks of the man who asked if the convoy would hold against the turn, and the man who answered that it would. A typhoon passes, low, brazen, certain, and is gone. She takes another sip and smiles. A small thing. A private thing. Everyone wants victories they can point to. She knows the best ones are the kind you can only feel. Portsmouth will unbutton itself by degrees. The fences at Southsea will come down. The promenade will learn again how to be a promenade. Children will find rusty things in the shingle and bring them home to mothers who sigh and send them back. Stokes Bay's concrete teeth will fade into the beach. The oil pumps under the hill will slow and then spin up for other ships, other occasions. Priddy's Hard will become a museum where the echo of barrels and boots remains, if you stand quietly enough. Royal Clarence will age into a story with rooms where bread once rose and salted meat went to sea. And in the telling, people will say, it was a depot. They will not be wrong, not exactly. But if you place your palm against the old brick and close your eyes, you can still hear the whisper of the other name. Nerve center. Not a single building or office. A collaboration. A city that learned, in time, to become an instrument. History prefers the thunderclap, the image that glitters and says, this is the moment. In truth, the moment is a year long, and it lives in hands that count and load and mend, in eyes that mark time, in engines that are ready because someone bent over them for an hour no one thought mattered. The assault on Normandy needed beaches and courage and steel. It also needed a place that could move men and munitions and fuel and food through itself like blood, without delay, without drama. In the spring of 1944, Portsmouth became that place, and Thorney Island flew the kind of sorties that made the coast less dangerous at the hour we asked it to be. German intelligence, led astray by our lies and held back by our skies, did not grasp the whole of it until the proof stood on sand it thought safe. The lesson is not that deception wins wars. It is that truth, protected by secrecy and served by discipline, can change the world without dropping a single grain of confetti. Night again. Another shift. A tram going uphill, its windows dulled by the salt. Margaret steps off and nods to the sentry who knows her now by the way she carries herself when she's tired. The tunnel greets her with the cool and the bright. She sits at her post and places the headset over hair that will smell of rubber until she washes it. Somewhere down in the harbor, a buoy clatters brief metal against metal. Farther off, a ship answers a challenge. More distantly still, a gun, ours, for practice, speaks its single syllable and keeps its counsel. She looks up at the clock. The moment comes when two hands meet and move past and nothing special happens at all. She likes those moments. They are when the world is held and quieted by work invisible to anyone not doing it. She says into the handset what she has said 100 times. The words do not change. The meaning sits behind them like weather. A city slept and woke. An island that was not an island in any romantic sense. but a spit of chalk and clay, ringed by water and work, rolled its tires into the surf and did not look back. No statue could have done what those factories and yards and depots did. No poster could have lifted what those women carried. No speech could have arranged the tides. When the landings needed a hand to steady the world, it reached for Portsmouth. And Portsmouth offered not a miracle, but a method made holy by ordinary hands. That is how you win wars you cannot afford to lose. History hides its greatest victories in the quietest places. If stories like this move you, stay with us as we walk the docks and airfields and tunnels that turned routine into resolve. There are more of them than you think, and each holds a piece of the war that shaped our world.